This tutorial is very important on how to make some lights in Source Filmmaker. Once I teach you how to master lights, you can make some awesome posters or animations in your videos. So let's get started. To create a light, right-click on the animation set editor and create a new light. Or click on this button to create a new light. To move the light, drag it onto the screen, and make sure you're in the motion editor to change it. If you select the light, down here you will see some light controls. Intensity is to make the light bright or dark. Field of view is to change the light to zoom in and out vertical or horizontal. Radius is to smooth the details of making the shadow a bit more realistic when in render. Shadow filter size is to blur out the shadows. Shadow A10 is to darken the ambient of the shadow. Distance is how far you want the light to be. Attenuation is to make the light very bright quickly. Shadow depth bias is to add some tiny details to the shadow. The more it is all the way down, the more it adds details. Far Z10 is the distance of the light. You can change the colors with these sliders here: red, green, or blue. To add a volumetric, right-click on the light. Then select Enable Volumetric. You can use the intensity or any other slider to control the light. Normally lights in SFM don't have an ambient function when you spawn a light. Because in real life, ambients do not look like this in pitch black. You need to create several ambient lights to create good shadow areas. Let me show you how I make ambient lights. First I create a light. Then I right-click it to disable the shadows. Then I zoom out all the way back to make a big ambient light. Then I used max distance and Far Z10, and right-clicked on both of them to change the max scale. Now I use the linear attenuation to set the brightness by double-clicking the slider to change the numbers. Next I change the ambient color, depending if it's a day or night scene. And finally, I copy and paste them around the entire scene. Character lighting is a 3 easy-step process: the main light, the ambient light, and the rim light. To darken the map, go to the camera. Then set the tone map scale to default. Now let's create a light. Remember, you can drag the light to the screen just like you control with the camera. Set the radius to 0.1. Set the shadow filter size to 0.03. And finally set the shadow depth bias all the way down. Now make a new light is the ambient light. Set it on the opposite side of the character where the light is facing. Now right-click on the light and disable the shadows. You can use any ambient color you want, and use the intensity to make it not too bright. Now for the rim lights. Set the light on the back of the character. Now let's make a couple of more lights in the background. Just remember, when it comes to making lights depending on your scene, Source Filmmaker can only contain 8 shadowed lights. In order to avoid that, is to disable some shadows with the lights. Glowing eyes are easier with lights than you think. To make some glowing eyes, create 2 lights for the eyes. Then place them in the eyes for them to glow. Next, open up the Lights menu and the Model's Body menu. Then drag to head to the Lights transform. Pretty simple and cool, right? Only one problem. There are light spots on the floor. How do I fix that? Simply go to the Lights option. And set the far Z attend to 0.01. Now it's time for the day and night cycles. Here I have a scene build for the lighting process. To make a daytime lighting, create an ambient light. Then set the max distance and far Z attend to 30,000. Use the linear attenuation to set the ambient shadows. Since it's a daytime scene, let's make it blue, because shadows in real life are not always pitch black. Now disable the shadows. Next, surround the entire map with ambient lights and group them called ambient light. Next is to create a sun. Add a light and call it sun. Set the point of view all the way up. Then use the linear attenuation to set where the sun is going to be at. Then later set the brightness down not too bright. Now set the radius to 0.1. Then set the shadow filter size to 0.003. Now let's make a nighttime version. Go to Camera and set the tone map scale to default. Next go to the ambient lights group and lower the intensity down and add a more darker blue. Now add some lights coming from different resources. In real life, at night time there is no light shining down the background. Because everything you see either pitch black, or a tone bluish color. Here's a tip: if your light source of shadows does not look that great, try bringing the light closer for more detail and duplicate them for each part of the background. The further the point of view, the shadows become more blurry. Here's another useful tip. Instead of relying on the volumetric lights, use these light effect models for more useful lighting. You can scale them by right-clicking and select Add Scale Control to transform. Now I got a light effect model. How do I make it transparent and add more color? Right-click on the model and select Add Override Materials. Then right-click it again, and go to Show an Element Viewer, then Model. Now go to Materials, then add an attribute, Float, $alpha. With the alpha you can make it bright or dim, like you do with intensity. The higher the number is, the brighter it gets. Add another attribute, Vector 3, $color. Here's how you change the color. The first number is red. The second number is green. And the third number is blue. I have the alpha set to 0.5, so in that case, I'll set it to 0.11 for a bluish light color. Here's another example of making a nighttime scene. Let's say you're filming using a daytime map, but you want it to make it into nighttime. How do I make that? Simply go to the camera controls and use the tone map scale by default or even darker. Then use the sliders to make the shadows. Use the intensity for more control of the lighting. Then use the linear attenuation for brightness scale. Then make a bluish light for the moon. Now add a couple of lights coming from other resources. There we go. Now we made a daytime map into a nighttime scene. I hope you enjoy this video. If this is helpful, leave a like if you want more new tutorials. Later in the next tutorial we will be discussing about scene building in Source Filmmaker. Subscribe, and I will see you next time.